Hello magical makers, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Nicole of Woven Tales Designs, and in today's fourth and final version of the Ever After hat, we will be covering the chunky weight sew version of my newest modification. If you've worked up the Ever After ears before, this is going to be slightly different, but we're going to get into all those details. This pattern is great if you want to make a set of ears, but you are someone that wants more casual, sporty, gender neutral. If you're a guy and you just want something a little more masculine than those weird caps that they have at the parks. If you are not wanting to make this version, which is again the chunky sew version of the hat, I have linked all of the other videos and the patterns and the shops for my patterns in the description below. Please check all of that out. If you've actually worked up the headband version and you want to skip ahead to something, just go ahead and make those 4 ear bases. So create this no sew ear bases. Those are very similar. You just fasten off with a long tail. Make 4 of those up and then jump ahead to the timestamp that is for the seaming of the ears, and that will take you to where you need to pick up with this pattern. The stitches that we will be using today, we will be using the single crochet stitch, half double crochet stitch, slip stitch, chain. Also, you will need to know how to work continuously in the round by using a stitch marker to mark the first stitch of every round. And you will also need to be able to identify the 3rd loop of a half double crochet stitch. That is super important. That is the foundation of our seaming stitches. I do slow it down a little bit in the video and show you exactly where to find those. I also take that seaming part very, very leisurely. We are not rushing through that because I know it's different for a lot of makers. No matter your crochet experience and no matter how many years you've been doing this, I know that that can throw some people for a loop, but it's intuitive. You can pick it up quick, and once you got it, you got it. All right, and without further ado, let's go into the materials and tools that we will be needing for today's project. Okay, folks, let's get right into the tools and materials we will need to create our Ever After hat today. Out of my sparkly bag, I have a few things to share with you for the project. We have, of course, our crochet hook. We are going to need a 6mm hook. We're going to need a pair of scissors, trusty pair, absolutely. We're going to need a measuring tape because we are going for precision with the placement of the ears. Tapestry needle is vital to this project, but also have another option for a needle in case the fabric of your hat is tough. You might need a pointier one. And also I have here a sewing pin. You'll see how we use that later. Not completely necessary, but definitely helpful. And then last but not least, for those tools, we're going to need a couple of markers. You need to be able to have something to mark up your baseball hat with, which is the main attraction of our materials here. I choose one that has about 6 segments and a button at the top and eyelets on each section. You can find similar ones like this at any local craft store, Amazon. Sometimes I thrift hats as well. Of course, we're going to need yarn, as always. This wouldn't be crochet without yarn, but today for this tutorial, I am going to be using 2 different types of yarns just because the seaming method is a little bit, well, you'll see later. It's easier for me to show you what we're doing if there's a contrast in our work. So that's why I'm using 2 colors. You'll need 40 yards of that if you're working the child size and 56 yards for the adult size. Of course, to stuff the ears, we're going to be using, again, polyfill like in the last tutorial, as well as our craft foam. I am showing the craft foam that I use, but you can use cardboard. If you want to recycle other materials in your house, absolutely go for it. As long as it can stabilize and keep those ears upright, we should be good to go. And on that note, that's enough blabbing for the intro. Let's go ahead and grab our yarn and our crochet hook and start by working the ear bases for chapter 1. Here we go. Okie dokie, let's get right into this with working up an ear base. This is what I have named the circle piece that you see that is the main part of the ear. I call it an ear base. And with our yarn, we are going to create a magic ring and chain 1. Similar to how you would start most circles and circle shapes. So once you have created a magic ring, chain 1, and then into our magic ring, we are going to work 7 single crochet stitches. That's 7 single crochets. And that's it for round 1. 7 single crochet into a magic ring. You're going to pull the tail tight to close up that ring after you've worked your 7. And then we will move on to round 2. And I just want to let you know, throughout this pattern, I will be providing you as many tips and tricks as I can think of along the way. I don't do any gatekeeping here on my channel. I really do like to share my success of discovery, I should say, with my friends and my yarny makers like you. So I hope you're okay with that. Let's move on to round 2. In round 2, we are going to start working continuously. So go ahead and grab that stitch marker that we had pulled out of our tool bags and get that going into that first stitch. Oh, you're going to see me be bad. I'm going to work up 2 stitches before placing my stitch marker. There we go. So for round 2, we are going to be working an increased stitch into every stitch around. And just to jog your memory, if you have brain fog because you're a young mom like myself, increased stitch is just 2 single crochet into the same stitch. And we're working that every stitch around, 2 single crochet into every stitch around. So we're doubling our stitch count for a total of 14 stitches for round 2 of the ear base. Work that up and I'll see you in a little bit. And before I move on to round 3, I'm just going to pause here and re-pull and tighten that original tail that we had for the magic ring. And I'm going to knot it as closely as I can get it to my piece. Now, the reason I do this so early is because actually when I have this kind of secure and the stitches aren't really like growing or moving anywhere, it keeps my ear base stitch work very consistent. That's the best way I can describe it. My tension stays pretty clean from doing this. So that's why I stopped to do that. And then now we can move on to round 3. And for round 3, we are going to start with a repeat and work that all the way around of single crochet into the next stitch and then increase into the next stitch. You're working that all the way around, single crochet into the next stitch, and increase into the next stitch until you have a stitch count total of 21 stitches for round 3 of the ear base. Continue to work that around and I will see you in a little bit. Okay, so for round 4, we are going to work again another increase growing row or round, excuse me. We are going to work a pattern repeat of single crochet into the next 2 stitches and then increase into the next stitch. Again, that single crochet into the next 2 stitches and then increase into the next stitch. And you are going to go ahead and work that all the way around once again until you have a stitch count total of 28 stitches for round 4. Now, this is where we are going to start splitting for the different sizes of the pattern. So if you are working the child size, if you're making this for a smaller little person, that is between the ages of 2 and 9, you are going to join at the end of this round, round 4, with a slip knot, and then catch up with us after the adults finish their last round of increases. So child size, join to the end of this round, join to the first stitch with a slip stitch, and then adults, keep going. After this round, you have one more round of increases. So here I am, I finished my round 4, and I'm just going to join with a slip stitch to that first stitch, and that's it. And you will be chaining up, but we'll cover that instruction once we catch up with the other size. So again, if you're a child size, join to the first stitch made and then wait for a little bit and then join us for round 5 and 6. And then for adults, we're going to keep going for round 5. Okay, so for round 5 with the adult size only, so if this is above the age of 9 and beyond, to infinity beyond, here we go, our last round of increases. We are going to work single crochet into the next 5 stitches. Oh, excuse me, single crochet into the next 3 stitches. Oh my gosh, pardon me. And then increase into the next stitch. Again, that's single crochet into the next 3 stitches and then increase into the next stitch. And then we should have, at the end of this round, a stitch count total of 35 stitches for round 5. And then at the end of this round, we're going to do a join to the first stitch made, like the child size did at the end of round 4. So here I am, I've reached the end, I have fast forwarded. You can totally pause the video and catch up to me if you need to. I've joined to that first stitch made. And then now we are going to catch up with our child size for the next and final round of the ear base. Okay, so now that we're both caught up, both sizes here are going to chain 2 to begin round 5 or 6. Then you're going to work a half double crochet stitch into the same stitch that you joined to. And then from here on, we are going to half double crochet into almost every stitch around. We are not going to work into the last set of repeats from the previous round to give you a little bit of a logical visual of what I'm trying to get achieved here, but you are going to be left with unworked stitches at the end of this round. So you'll have less of a stitch count than you did from the previous round, just as a little heads up here. Don't freak out. It's going to work out, I promise. So for this round, we chain 2 to begin, half double crochet into the same stitches joining, and then you're going to work half double crochet into the next 22 or 28 stitches. So half double crochet into the next 22 stitches if you're working the child size, and then half double crochet into the next 28 stitches if you are working the adult size. And after you have worked that long string of half double crochets into almost every stitch around, you're going to work one more half double crochet into the 24th or the 30th stitch. Then you're going to chain 2, slip stitch, and then fasten off. And when we go to fasten off here, we're going to fasten off with a very long 10 to 12 inch long tail. This is going to come in handy for sewing later. If you worked the headband version of this pattern, it's a very similar process. So know that we are just working with what we know works for us. So yes, chain 2, half double crochet into the same stitch as joining, half double crochet into the next 22 or 28 stitches, half double crochet, chain 2, slip stitch all into that last and final stitch, leaving 4 or 5 unworked stitches left in that round. So if you're working the child size, once you reach your last bit of instruction here, you should have 4 unworked stitches from the previous round. If you're working the adult size, you should have 5 unworked stitches from the previous round. That is on purpose. We need this kind of like indented edge here for attaching the bottom of the ear to the hat. That is very important. Again, if you've worked up the headband version of this, you know exactly why we do this. And it hasn't really changed. This has always worked as a really great shape for the mouse ears, so that is why we have it. So from here on out, congratulations, you made your first ear base. Go ahead and pause the video, work up 2 more identical ear bases, just like you see here, with the same long 10 to 12 inch long tail, and then finally work up a 4th ear base that's only worked. You only have to work up 1 through 4 and 5 of the rounds. So work up a 4th and final ear base with the single crochet rounds from the ear base. And pull up a long tail, don't let it unravel. We will use it in just a second for the next section. Okay, so we're using this 4th and final ear base, rounds 1 through 4 or 5, to kind of make a, give us a template as to how much and how big we need to cut out of our foam for an ear insert, which is what is going to stabilize and give our ear structure on the inside. If we were to just use polyfill, that is an option, but you run the risk of it being a little bit droopy and
just trust me on this. The insert is almost kind of like the skeleton of the ear, if I can put it bluntly. And this video is coming out just in time for Halloween, so very on brand for the time of year. Anyway, so in order to get this done, we have a couple methods. We can either use the edge of our scissors to kind of trace into the foam, and I recommend that if you're using a very dark foam, or if you have a light colored foam or you're working with cardboard, something that you can easily see your kind of like writing on, then you can use a marker or a pen or whatever. I liked using these kind of like Sharpie fine tipped markers here, but it's gonna depend on what material you're using. The original video, I used the edge of my scissors to score into the foam to trace the shape of the ear insert, or excuse me, the ear base. And that worked out just fine because I was on black foam. But now I've gotten wiser. They also now make this foam in a white color, so I don't have to suffer with the black color anymore. I can kind of use this. But anyway, so let's get right into it. That's enough blabbing. Here we go. I've placed my ear base, rounds 1 through 5, my fourth one, onto my material. And I'm just going to lightly trace the outer edge of the ear base onto my material. And I'm not really using like an entire like singular line. I used to, and then I got stressed that the circle wasn't perfect enough, and I was really stressed about it because I'm a perfectionist. And then I realized, you know what? I could just trace it in a dotted line, and then my brain knows how to cut a circle once I'm given most of what the circle looks like. So then I can just go in and cut it out like a professional, because I'm not 5 anymore and I know how to use scissors. So that is what we're doing here. Once you have it traced out, either drawing it or scoring it, and I'm going to take a second here to kind of like show you. Don't grip the edge of the blade of your scissors. I've cut myself before, just be careful. But you can either use the point of the scissors or just the edge of it, depending on what your scissors are like. I'm using the point here. I've also actually in a bind used my tapestry needle because it was like sharp enough. You really just need like an indent. Your eye will catch these scratch marks very easily. You're not going to see them on camera here, but they are there and you can actually feel them really easily. So there we go. We've traced our ear base. We're going to set that aside for the time being. We'll bring it back in just a minute. But now we're going to cut this shape out, and we are going to try to get it as close to a circle shape that we can get, like a perfect circle. Believe it or not, with this material, and the thicker and more durable the material is, you're going to get the shape of it will affect what the ear looks like on the outside. So I would highly recommend taking some time here and just cutting off the rough corners from the first trim and trying to get it as perfectly spherical as you can get it. It does matter. I don't know. I like things to look nice when I make them. If I'm going to take the time to sit down and work on this, I want it to look great. So take your time with cutting it out, and you're going to see me trim quite a bit off of it, but that's okay. As long as your ear insert is not larger than the ear base, we're in a good place. Oh my gosh, I rhymed. Oh, love it. Okay, next thing, just to finish this shape, we want it to match kind of like that bitten cookie look of the ear base. So we do need to cut a bit off of the bottom there. So just pick a spot, and you can either fold it over the bottom edge like that, about maybe like a half an inch, not more than like 3/4 of an inch. Find that and press that line, and then just kind of cut on that little fold that you made. Sometimes I take the edge of the ear base and I put it overlapping the edge of the insert circle, and then I just kind of trace that line of where it overlaps, and then I cut it out. But honestly, this doesn't have to be super, super perfect, just enough so that you're emulating that flatter, that weird little flat cookie edge that the ear base has. Okay, and there we go. We have that done. That's our first ear insert. We are now going to take this insert and we're going to place it back on top of the foam or whatever material you're using, and you are going to trace that to make a second ear base. Voila! Look at that, the magic of film. All right, so we have 2. Now, if you're making a more 2-dimensional ear aesthetic, I would cut 2 more of these babies out and set them aside and not even worry about the polyfoam, but you can do that on your own time. For now, let's go ahead and finish the last round of our 4th and final ear base, completing round 5 or 6 of it, and I will see you in a little bit. Okay, so you now have 4 of these ear bases all completed, all done. We have the ear inserts, but we do need to seam them together. Normally, we would seam them with an ear strip right down the center, and that would be our jam. But because I wanted a little more of a streamlined look with the hats, making it a little less frou-frou poofy, that is why we are doing a little bit of a different method. So before we get into this, I do want to invite you in on the world of the half double crochet third loop only technique. If you haven't done this before, here's a little intro for you. Now, most single crochet stitches have a back bar on the wrong side of their anatomy, and the same actually will go for a half double crochet stitch. There is also a back bar, or like a horizontal bar strand of yarn that comes from when we yarn over before we insert a hook into the stitch for the half double crochet. Now, if you insert your hook into that back bar of a half double crochet stitch, you shall not see it on the right side of your work, and that is why we use it for seaming. It's not the front or the back loop. It is an entirely different thing called the third loop. So that is exactly what we're looking at here, is a not first or second loop on the top of the hook or top of the stitch, but a third loop on the back of the stitch. So that is my 2 cents on that. That is how you locate it. It's the quick study on it. And if you need any more information, I would highly suggest checking other YouTuber creators on this app, because they definitely are going to have a little more insight than I will, or maybe just explain it in a way that you'll understand it better. And just to give you a heads up, when we go to start seaming, that first half double crochet stitch, or the last half double crochet stitch of round 5 and 6, they're very much tighter than the other half double crochet stitches. So because of that, the third loop is going to be a little bit tighter to get it into. But know that we are working into that first or last stitch to begin our seaming. We're not working into the chain 2. Don't touch the chain 2. The chain 2 is not coming into play until we go to attach the ears onto the hat later. So with that being said, I'm going to grab my other yarn here. Like I said, I'm using a different colored yarn just to give you a little bit of grace for your eyes here so you can see the difference in stitches. I'm going to create a slip knot that has a 6 to 8 inch long tail. That is very important. We're going to use that tail for sewing later as well. I'm going to turn my work over, find the last half double crochet of one of the ear bases, turn my work around, and on the very back of it, I'm going to insert my hook with that working loop of yarn already on it into the third loop of that last half double crochet. So the right side of this ear base is going to be facing you. Now you're going to have 2 things on your hook. You're going to have the third loop of that front piece. I'm going to call it the front piece now, and you're going to have the working loop of your yarn. Grab a second ear base, locate the first half double crochet of round 5 or 6, and then you're going to insert your hook into that third loop right there. Now that one's definitely shorter than the other ones, but it is there, I promise, and it is a separate entity from the chain 2. Insert your hook into that back piece's third loop, the first half double crochet's third loop, and now you have 3 things on your hook. You have the third loop from the back piece, the third loop from the front piece, and you have the working yarns loop on your hook. Regroup your yarn now that we have some friends to work with here, and you're going to yarn over, and you're going to pull through the third loop on the back piece, the third loop on the front piece, and finally the third loop, the loop on your hook. Oof, there's only 2 third loops there. So that is our first seaming stitch. It's going to be the trickiest one. Everything else after this should be smoother. So to do the rest of the seaming stitches for this method and technique here, we are going to go ahead and insert our hook into the next third loop of the front piece, which should be easy to find. The next third loop of the back piece, we are going to, with 3 things on our hook again, we're going to yarn over, pull through the third loop of the back piece, the third loop of the front piece, and then finally the loop on your hook. And that is a normal seaming stitch. The first one's just a little bit different because we start with that slip knot. So continue this method around until you have worked a total of 24 or 28 slip stitches all the way around. Just like that. Same method, insert your hook into the third loop of the front piece, third loop of the back piece, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And essentially, if I can really break this down to be the simplest that I can make it, this is just slip stitching these 2 pieces together. And instead of going through the tops of the stitches like you would normally do if you're seaming things together with crochet, you're going through both pieces' third loops. The right sides of these pieces should always face each other, so the wrong sides are facing out, because the seam is going to remain on the inside of the work. So we want the wrong sides to be out. And you're going to work this all the way around. And another little side note here, the very first and last half double crochets that are at the end of this set of stitches, they're going to be tight again because those are kind of crowded with those chain 2 slip stitches. So just make sure that you don't work into the chain 2. Remember to count your slip stitches. You can count them by counting those V's that you're making all the way around. And that's probably the easiest way to do so. And continue to work around, pause the video, rewind if you need help and want to watch it again. And here we go. I'm coming up on my last half double crochet for the front piece. As you can see, I got my chain 2 next to it, and it's just a little bit tighter. You're going to see me use the hook part of my hook this time instead of the point of my hook to kind of latch on in there and kind of grab that. And then I'm going in for the very last one. This one's easier to see and easier to get my hook into, but I'm not going into the chain 2, not the chain 2. I'm going to yarn over, pull through all 3 loops of my hook, and then I'm going to fasten off because I finished with a 10 to 12 inch, or excuse me, 6 to 8 inch long tail. Again, the tail lengths should be the same as we begin and end the seaming. And we will use those tails for sewing later, so you shouldn't have any ends to weave in with this ear base at all, because we trimmed the original tails of the bases and we use the tails to sew with later. So here it is. This is what it looks like all finished. It's actually really nice, really clean. Should look like you have a cookie with a bite out of it. And go ahead and we're going to flip this inside out, and then we're going to stabilize our ears in this next section. And just before we stabilize the ears, I just want to show you the difference now between the ear headbands and the ear hat ears. They are different, and I actually really love this method. I do need to find a way to just incorporate this with the headband pattern, and I'm sure it's actually a lot easier than I'm thinking of. So here we go. I am going to stabilize the inside of my ear with one of my inserts, just like that. Again, this is where you're really going to test and see like how your cutting skills panned out. So that's what it looks like with just one insert on the inside. If you wanted that 2-dimensional look and you wanted it to be a little less poofy, no polyfill, you can add a second ear insert for a flatter 2-dimensional look. But for me, I'm going to stick to what I know and love, which is a little bit of polyfill on the inside on either side of that insert material, just like that. And I do want to give a quick shout out to all the sewists out there that have come before me that have made mouse ears via sewing skills or no sew, where they just kind of glue stuff together. I have watched a lot of mouse ear videos and research on how I could adapt this to crochet. So if you're curious how that came about, actually, and you're a young designer and you want to make something that's not been done before, check out sewing videos and just maybe get some like ideas, like could you do this with crochet? Because sometimes, you know, it's fun to see if your yarn engineering skills can solve a problem. You know, I think some of the most popular patterns are the ones that solve problems or just make something that's not been done before. So here we go. This is the polyfill added, the ears stabilized with the insert, and now that seam is pretty much nearly invisible. So we love that. And that's what it looks like from the top down. That insert should be nice and tucked in there, not sticking out. So if you need to, trim it down. It shouldn't be pushing the sides of your ear waist too much. And we're going to repeat all of that, seaming of the ear bases and stuffing and stabilizing them. Go ahead and do that, pause the video, and I will see you for the next section. Okay, so I have my 2 ears seamed and ready to attach to my hat. They're looking great. Sometimes I like to compare them next to each other just to make sure they're very similar in poofiness or quality, because once you add these to the ears, you cannot take that back. So, welcome to chapter 2, everyone. I'm so happy you've made it this far. Before we add the ears to the hat, we are needing to do a little bit of work on our hat in general. And we can also talk a little bit about the hat's anatomy here, just to give ourselves a familiarity with what we have. Most hats should have a center button that you see right there. That's going to be our North Star for measuring the placement of the hats. And most hats do have that. If you don't, that is going to have to be your cross to bear. So I'm going to use that to begin our first measurement. I'm measuring from the center of that button, and I'm going down the side along the side segment. Remember, there's 6 segments to a hat. And I'm going to line my measuring tape up with the eyelet there, because the eyelet is actually directly in the center of that side section. So down that side section there, I'm going to put a dot at 1.5 inches for the adult size. If you're working the child size, you're going to put your mark at 1.25 inches. Now I just start with a small dot and I just check out, making sure that I did line it up between the button and that eyelet there. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to draw a line, a short line through that dot. Now, if you have the written version of this pattern, these steps can be kind of arranged and rearranged according to your comfortability with prepping the hat. So know that if you've gotten the written version, this is slightly different, but it's all pretty much doing the same thing. So it's all good. Don't worry about the order. Just remember what we're doing here. So we're going to take our measuring tape and we're going to, for the second measurement, we're going to go ahead and mark 2.5 inches from the first measurement. Now, if you're working the child size, it's 2 inches, but if you're working the adult size, it's 2.5 inches. Again, you're seeing me place a dot there. And I'm double checking that it is in line with the button and the eyelet still. I kind of skewed it a little bit, but I'm going to correct it here, as you can see. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to just draw a line to that measurement. Oh, actually, I didn't. Okay, I guess I'm just going to live with that dot. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to live with that dot right there. That's my bad. Sometimes this happens. I'm human. I've made 3 videos already where I did this really great. And this one, this one just shows my human side. Anyway, so we're making 2 measurements here. The first one that we made will be where the ear starts on the topmost part of the hat. And then the other measurement, the second one, is where the ear is ending in its placement down the side of the hat. You can totally adjust these as you're seeing me kind of like move around with my measuring tape. If you want your ears closer together, it's just as simple as making that first measurement a little bit shorter. Maybe it's not 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches, maybe it's just 1 inch. If you want to adjust it, that's totally up to you. This is just what works for me. This makes my ears 3 inches apart. And if that 2.5 inch mark for the second measurement is just simply too long and your ears ended up breaking a little bit smaller, you can totally adjust that as well. But this is what I do based on my gauge and kind of what I've found to be true for many of the hats that I've made over time. All right, so that is first and second measurement. Let's move on to this next step here. Okay, so now what we're going to do is a little bit of artwork here. We're going to use a dotted line to connect the end of those first and second measurements together, creating this skinny rectangular shape that you see here. This, believe it or not, is my favorite way to help myself with the sewing process. if you've watched the vlog that I put on YouTube showing my process of this, I definitely gave myself, you know, a lot of grace, but it was very difficult to know how and where to sew these ears before I figured out this dashed line rectangle situation, what have you. So believe it or not, this is the easiest and fastest way to prep this hat. Once you have this done, you should have 2 skinny rectangles on the side, and you should be good to go for chapter 3, where we are now finally going to attach these ears to the hat. So mark up both sides symmetrically as you will, and I will see you in a little bit. All right, now grab one of your prepped ears with its 4 tails. We are going to thread one of the seaming tails with a tapestry needle or a sewing needle with a large eye, whichever one you choose. I know that this tapestry needle will easily puncture through the hat fabric, so work with whatever is going to be easiest for you. It's totally pick your poison at this point. So we're going to use this tail that's threaded in our needle, and we are going to use that to tack the bottom side seam edge to our short line. And it doesn't really matter which short line you start with, because what you do to one side of the ear, you do to the other, but just begin tacking it down. You don't need to sew a lot to get this tacked down. You really just need to do enough to kind of make sure that it's secure and it's not going to pull up. And golly, you're going to see me playing around with these angles. I do apologize. There's no cute, you know, very demure way of sewing this in the beginning. It's a little bit floppy and a little bit awkward, especially when I'm doing it for the camera. But if you can see, I'm kind of going up through those seams, and I'm going through the sides of the ears. I do what I can, and that's all I can do with this video. I'm not a sewist. You know, this is the most sewing I ever do, is with making modifications for these videos. But it should only take you maybe like 5 or 6 stitches to really tack down that seam. So take your time, put on some soothing music, or watch a Gilmore Girls episode, something that makes you feel lighthearted, because I know we don't all love sewing, but the alternative to this is using a hot glue gun. And I feel like if you've made it this far in the video, that means that you're not a hot glue fan and you prefer the sewing method, and that's why you're here. So take your time with this part. It does feel kind of finicky. And once I'm done with all of my little tacking stitches that I do, I end up knotting it on the inside of the hat. And then I pull the tail back up through the ear, and I fasten off with it kind of hidden inside the ear. And that's a very similar technique to like amigurumi designs. If you were to sew pieces together, usually you hide the tail and the evidence if you're sewing into your work, and then just trim any excess yarn. So that's what we're doing here. Oh, look, I'm knotting it on the outside of the work. Wow. Well, that's the first time I did that. Usually I put it the other places on the inside of the hat. Oh well, take my word for it. And if you want to seam it and knot it on the outside, that's totally up to you. So there we go. I'm trimming that off. You're going to repeat this process for the other bottom edge of the seam with the other seam tail to that other short line, if that makes sense. So just repeat what you did with the other side of the ear. Like I said, what you do to one side of the ear, do to the other side. It's very symmetrically pleasing type of construction. So go ahead and work that up again, you know, catch up with some Gilmore Girls, and I will see you in a little bit for the next step. Okay, once that's tacked down, both side seaming edges should be looking pretty good. Be gentle with the fabric of your hat. I really have to stress that a lot here, because we can get, if we're like myself and can get a little aggressive with the tightness of pulling the needle through, you're going to warp that fabric. So just take caution. Before we begin this next step, we're going to help ourselves out a little bit. We're going to take a sewing pin if you have it. If you don't, it's okay. This is totally doable without. And just tack that chain 2 corner that's opposite of your threaded tail there, and tack that down to the hat, because you really don't want the edge to be pulling along as you're trying to sew it down. It tends to move a lot. And again, this is like the floppiest bit. The very last edge we sew down will be easiest, but thread a tapestry needle with that tail, one of those longer 10 to 12 inch long tails, and you're going to begin sewing the unworked stitches down onto your dotted line edge from round 4 or 5. Remember when I said they were going to come in handy? Well, here they are in their glory. Those unworked edges, those unworked stitches, those are now going to be our best friends as we attempt to sew down the bottom edge of our ear to the hat. I really go in and use this chain 2, by the way, the little corner that we have from the chain 2 slip stitch area. I really utilize and tack that down and kind of get that really sewn down first before I move along the edge. So if you're wondering why I'm spending a lot of time over here, that is why. But again, be careful in how you're pulling the fabric. You don't want to do too much pinching because it'll warp the hat fabric, and then you're going to have kind of like a funny looking hat. I've done this to several hats. I don't know if you can tell by the disclaimer length, but that is why I give this note. Anyway, so we're going to now, once we've tacked down that chain 2 corner, continue to work whatever seaming stitch you want to do here. I tend to favor the back stitch a lot, where I go up through the top of an unworked stitch like you see me doing here, and then I go ahead and I go back the way that I came down and through the hat. And then when I resurface with my needle, I'm actually coming up into a spot that goes into the next unworked stitch. That's a lot of words. Basically, I'm just using a back stitch, or my version of a back stitch, for this part of the sewing. If you've done hand sewing of any kind or embroidery, I think you'll recognize that term back stitch. And if not, that's really just where you go back after you make a stitch for the next stitch. And that's really all I do here. Just kind of take my time, sew at my pace. Another thing you could do, I didn't really mention this in the pattern, so this is a bonus if you don't have the pattern, but are learning from the video here, or you do have the pattern, you're watching the video just for clarification. You could totally weave in this original tail and use crochet thread to sew down all of these parts of the ear to the hat. It's up to you. You don't have to use the yarn tail, especially I would say if you've worked this up with yarn that kind of like is a little, how can I put this nicely? If you're working with a yarn that's got a very weak construction, similar to those single ply acrylic yarns that we all love that break off by looking at them. If you're using those, or like chenille yarns that break really easily, that aren't very dense in structure, I would not use those tails to sew onto your hat. I would totally just weave those in as normal, but then reattach a thicker, sturdier yarn to your ear so that you can have something to sew with, whether that be crochet thread, maybe a cotton-based yarn. Mercerized cotton is so magical and wonderful. Oh, you're seeing me in this section going back up and coming out where that chain 2 corner is, and I'm using my tail to kind of tack that down. And I also try my best here to kind of close up the opening of the seam. The seam kind of opens up a little bit here, so I kind of use this to keep that a little bit tighter. I do make a pass going one way, and then I go back with my sewing the way that I came. So I'm going to speed this up here. Basically, I'm just going back the way I came, retracing my sewing steps here along this bottom edge. That just reinforces it. I have made hats where I've only done one pass, and while it is quicker, you're gonna have a floppier hat. It's not gonna be as sturdy, so I do highly recommend doing this. And then you won't have the ears be so floppy. All right, so go continue to work this through, and I will see you in a little bit. You are going to be sewing the other edge down the same exact way with the other long tail, using that sewing pin for a little bit of help in keeping things in place. And that's basically it. Like, this super approachable sewing method is great for people that, you know, want to take a chance and try something new. And then maybe if you get really bold, you can do the glue version. I don't know. The sky's the limit. These hats work up so fast because all you're crocheting is just the ears themselves. Here I go. I am knotting it on the inside of my work. I knew I was going to do it that way. Okay. So here I am. I knot it on the inside of my work, and I hide that tail up inside the ear and fasten off. So go ahead and work this all up. Rewind the video if you need a little bit of assistance. Thank you for all your grace with the camera angles and how crazy it is. Oh, I promise my future videos won't be like this. But, you know, what can you do? All right, so we have one ear sewn down. This is what it looks like all attached. With the sewing, you might get a little bit of warping and puckering at the sewing stitch area. That is just kind of normal. You know, you could also take a bit of stabilizer material on the inside of your hat if you wanted to have a little bit something more to work into. That idea came to mind not too long ago. So I haven't tried that method yet, but if you want to, and let me know in the comments below how it worked out for you, great. I hope this wasn't too painful for you. Go ahead and attach the second ear to the other side of the hat in all those same methods, sewing down the seams first and then the bottom edges, using sewing pins as needed to keep things in place. And I will see you for the closing remarks. Wow, congratulations. It's a small world after all. Congratulations, you have completed the Ever After hat pattern. I hope you're proud of yourself. Go ahead and find a mirror and stand in front of it and admire your work. Place it on your head. Give a little happy dance. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for watching this video. Let's go over to my real face for some closing remarks and well wishes.
All right, magical makers, I hope you have enjoyed today's tutorial. Again, I've had so much fun being here with you and having a magical project to work on. If you have any questions and comments, please again leave those in the description below. I am a mompreneur and a stay-at-home mom, so I have plenty of time to interact with you. I'm not one of those content creators. I'm a slow content creator, so I have time to slow down for you if you need it. Also, please feel free to tag me in any of your photos on social media, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. It makes my day every time I see your creations, and it is so fun to see our magical little yarny community grow. And on that note, please go ahead and check out my Ever After Club. It is a growing, slow growing community of makers that like to make things for their trips to the parks. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in, I have the link for that as well in the description below. And on that note, have a creative day adding magic to your stitches in your own way, and I will see you in the next tutorial.